Hello, I'm Grin Grimsley, and welcome to another episode of Grin Reviews. This week I've been looking at a game called Tapeworm, which firstly made me wonder what is with video games and having disgusting creepy crawlies as their names. First we've had centipede, then we've had millipede, and now we have tapeworm, which is even more gross than the other two. However, both centipede and millipede were both fantastic games, so the name itself got my hopes up. Unfortunately, then the cartridge and video game developer got my hopes down. Tapeworm, you see, is developed by Spectra Video. The only other game I've ever played developed by Spectra Video is Planet Patrol, which is basically the worst game I've ever played because it's so very broken and unplayable. So, having slightly mixed feelings, I put the game in and turned it on, and to my surprise, I saw something quite recognizable. Once again, we're going to have to take a trip down memory lane and talk about last year, in which I reviewed a game called Surround. In Surround, you play as a block with an ever-growing tail against another block with an ever-growing tail. If you touch their tail or if you touch your own tail, you die, so the object of Surround is to defeat people with your tail while avoiding running into your own tail. Tapeworm, on the other hand, while being similar, does differ in quite a few important ways. The first and possibly most obvious here is that Tapeworm, unlike Surround, is single-player focused. In Surround, you were mainly trying to defeat an opponent, which always worked better if they were a real person. However, Tapeworm is playing against the computer as the main thing, and the only multiplayer option has you taking in turns trying to get a high score against each other. The other most noticeable difference between the two games is the way the tail works. In Surround, your tail never actually moves and instead grows at the point between where you started and where you are now. This means it basically keeps a record of where you've moved and allows you to use it as a barricade to try to take out your opponent. However, in Tapeworm, your tail follows behind you, growing as you pick up items. This means it can only grow to a certain length each level of the game, and so never really presents itself as much of an obstacle, unlike in Surround. And yes, you did hear me correctly, I did say levels, which is another major difference between Tapeworm and Surround. In Tapeworm, the object of the game is to collect 10 items that appear on the screen, with each item you collect adding length to your tail. You must collect these items before the bug on the bottom of the screen gets to the fruit. After collecting these 10 items, a fruit will appear on the screen and you have to go into the fruit to pass through to the next level. Once again, as I said, this game is single player focused, so you're not trying to defeat an enemy, but instead trying to accumulate a high score. As you progress to higher levels, the items you pick up on the screen give you extra points than the previous level. But wait, you say, this all sounds a bit too good for Spectra Video, and you are correct. The first major mistake I found in the game is that the levels loop. After you play through the 5 levels, it loops back to the beginning, which is fine because you can't expect a game to have unlimited levels. However, the issue is that once it does loop back to the beginning, it doesn't speed up at all, and the items go back to being what they were worth at the start of the game, which means your quickly climbing score is reduced back to a crawl, and you're basically being punished for doing well in the game. It's really quite frustrating, and it just makes no sense why an item in level 5 should give you 25 points when an item in level 6 only gives you 5 points. On top of that, because level 6 is literally just level 1 again, the difficulty curve just drops completely off, and the slowly increasing challenge that was coming with the progressive levels just disappears entirely, and you're, well, quite literally back at the beginning. It's almost as if Spectra Video didn't actually expect anyone to play the game long enough to get to the end of level 5 and find out that the game was basically incomplete. Because the speed and therefore difficulty of the game does not increase as the levels loop, this really doesn't have any real replay value, because once you've completed the game once, you're basically done with it. In games like Missile Command, you're driven to come back to the game over and over again in hopes of beating your previous high score. But in this game, once you get to level 6 and you have 3 lives, you basically know that you can get through the game okay, and therefore you know that getting a higher score than your previous play through the game just means playing the game longer. There's no longer any challenge, and it just turns into an endurance thing dependent on how much patience you have for this crappy unfinished game. The other major issue with this game is the enemies that come across the screen from the top or from the side. These enemies move faster than your character can actually move, so it's not even a matter of reflexes. It's just the luck of the draw whether they come out of a side that you're too close to avoid. You can play the game on Variation 3 setting, which does actually make your character move faster and therefore does make the game a little bit more difficult. However, it has the exact same level looping issue that Variation 1 does, so once again it runs into the same issue of once you've passed the game, you've done it and you just don't need to do it again. This game has also got very annoying sound effects, and I ended up needing to play it on mute because it was giving me a headache. Although all of that said and done, unlike Spectra Video's other game, Planet Patrol, Tapeworm is not fundamentally broken, and I do admit that I had fun playing through the game the first time I played through it. Although due to all of the various issues I have named, I would not suggest anyone actually goes out and buys this game. It might be fine for a weekend rental, but its complete lack of replayability just makes it not really add anything to your collection. So I suppose in closing, if you enjoyed Surround and want to play a similar game that's not quite as good, head down to your local video store and overnight rent a copy of Tapeworm for the Atari 2600.